Hello, and welcome to Earth Day 2020. My name is Frederick Walker, and Marshall University is proud to partner up with Fairmont State University to tell you a little bit about electric vehicles. I serve as the secretary of the West Virginia Electric Auto Association, and we're happy to assist Marshall in this regard. Today we're going to look at a typical electric vehicle, emphasizing those things about it that differentiate it from a gasoline car. And we're going to use this 2017 Chevy Bolt as our demonstrator. It has many, if not all, of the features shared by all electric cars. We're going to have a walk-around tour, and we'll actually have a little bit of a driving experience as well. First, how do you tell an electric car is different from a gasoline car? One of the things that differentiates it is the front grille. Because our motor does not need to be cooled as much as a gasoline engine, the grille is very small, and the only part of this grille that opens is about 4 inches across the front of the car. We've moved around to the side of the vehicle so I can point out some aspects that truly make electric vehicles different. The battery in an all-electric car is very large, too big to hide underneath the back seat or in the trunk. And so almost all electric vehicle manufacturers place the battery as the floor, the entire bottom of the car, running from the front wheel to the back is the battery. I also want to point out that the weight of that battery is below the axle of the wheel. So it's very difficult to have an electric vehicle roll over because that weight is down low. The other thing it does is it enables us to distribute that 1,000 pounds equally on all 4 tires, so that almost every tire has the same amount of weight, which certainly adds to traction and stability and driving characteristics. Let's move around to the back and see what we can point out there. We're behind the EV now to point out 2 points, one of which is very obvious, and that is that this car does not have an exhaust pipe. It makes no exhaust, and that's why they're also called ZEVs, or zero emission vehicles. The second thing I want to point out is what you think you already know, and that is the brake lights. But on an electric vehicle, because the regenerative braking, which does not require you to step on the brake pedal to bring the car to a complete stop, is what you use almost all the time, we have to have a way of turning the brake lights on without your ever touching the brake pedal. All electric vehicles have a small accelerometer, kind of like a Fitbit, that will turn on your brake lights whenever you slow down ahead of a preset rate of slowing. So the brake lights come on, we're not riding the brakes. In fact, you never wear out your brake pads because you almost never step on the brakes to stop the car. Let's look again now at the side and at the charging port. I'm standing by the front tire on the driver's side to show you the charging port of the Chevrolet Bolt. Most gasoline cars fill their gas tank from the rear, but most electric vehicles plug in to charge near the front. When we open the port, you'll see that there's actually 2 parts to this outlet. The top part, which looks rather round, is for plugging in when you charge with alternating current. This is not an actual plug, but just a demonstration, and we plug it in just like you plug in your cell phone and charge the car overnight. However, the highest voltage we get in alternating current is 240 volts. And when you travel, you want to charge faster. And so there are direct current devices that charge at 800 to 1,000 volts. And they plug into the openings that are just beneath the orange door. So these 2 pins, they're called down here, are for direct current charging. That enables you to drive a few hundred miles and in 30 or 40 minutes charge up enough to go another 200. Let's stop for a moment here and answer a question that we commonly hear. How long does it take to charge your car? With slight tongue-in-cheek, we say less time than it takes to fill your car with gasoline. And that's because we fill our car at night while we're sleeping. And it takes 15 seconds to plug in the evening and 15 seconds to unplug in the morning. If you do this twice a week for a year, you've spent 52 minutes charging your car. The gasoline car owner, on the other hand, drives to the station about once a week, and that trip takes about 15 minutes when you consider driving, pumping, waiting with the pump, and coming back home. Let's look at the slides that sort of explain this charging event in more detail. There are 4 levels of charging provided by the devices called electric vehicle supply equipment. 2 of these run on alternating current and 2 on direct current. These levels are defined in kilowatts, but we're using volts, which are more familiar. The 2 AC levels are found in your home, and the appliances that use these are well known to you. There is no direct current in American homes, and these are the levels found at the stations along the highway, which help you to charge much more quickly. Let's look then at a couple of these levels in more detail. This is a typical 110 to 120 volt AC outlet in your home. You can plug in your EVSE and plug in the other end to the car and add about 4 to 5 miles of range for every hour you're plugged in. If you are a true commuter, this is plenty. You can always add 50 miles overnight at level 1 charging. It's also good at the airport long-term parking. This is a typical level 2 charger that you might put in your garage or at a place of employment. The outdoor ones look a little different, but they all run on 240 volts. They generally add 24 to 25 miles for every hour you're plugged in, and this is wonderful for overnight charging or even in the 8 hours at the workplace. This is the most common charger found at a motel or hotel. This is a map showing by the green markers where every level 2 charger is at a motel or hotel or other place for public charging. This is called the PlugShare map. This is a typical direct current fast charger. Although it is level 1, running at 40 kilowatts. Instruments running at 150 to 350 kilowatts are now available. This is the type of EVSE you would find along the highway to charge you quickly and get you on the road again. You should remember that the charging rate decreases from the beginning to the end of the charge. This is a map of charge points, plugs, and charging stations. Each number in the circle represents a plug to charge a car. There are other companies that make them as well, and you can find these on apps. We've moved inside the car now to point out some of the features that are fairly unique to electric vehicles. Most modern vehicles have plenty of electrical outlets to run your devices, but it should be pointed out that most electric vehicles have heated seats. And this is done because it decreases your range almost nothing to heat the seat, whereas if you heat the entire cabin, it does decrease the miles you can drive very slightly, about 4 miles out of every 100 miles. It does, however, when you do heat the cabin, come on very quickly because we're not dependent upon the heat of a gasoline engine to provide heat for the cabin, but rather an electric heater run off of the high voltage battery. When you get in an electric vehicle, you immediately notice that there's no ridge running the length of the vehicle and makes the back seat truly a 3-passenger comfortable area. The steering wheel is also heated in this vehicle, and we really appreciate that on cold days. Start the car and see what we can find. It has to boot up like a computer, so it does take 3 or 4 seconds to get the electric components talking to each other. I know that you don't want to run out of gas in your car, and we don't want to run out of electricity either. But the electric vehicle gives you lots of information to help you know where you are and how you're doing. Over here on the left of the instrument panel are these green bars This is like your gasoline tank gauge. You can see that I have more than 3/4 of my battery left. But even more importantly, since each one of those green bars represents 5% of the battery, and my battery is 60 kilowatt hours, each bar is about 3 kilowatt hours, and each kilowatt hour will take you about 3 to 4 miles. I've been driving lately so that I'm getting 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour. And I follow this as I'm driving on a long trip and pretty much ignore it when I'm driving locally. You see 3 numbers over here on the left. One of them is called a minimum, and that says that if I don't take any regard to technique, I will at least get 137 miles. The middle number here, which is not an average, it says 168. And that means if I drive the way I've been driving for the last 5 miles, I'll get about 168 more miles to go. The top number is that if I could slow down without impeding traffic and drive with my technique a little bit different, or turn the heater off, I could get as much as 208 miles. The Chevy Bolt has an EPA of 238 miles, which is normally what you'll get on an average charge. But I've had as many as 300 miles and as little as 150. On the right-hand side of the screen over here, we see the power that we're actually using at the moment. This number 1 represents that we're using 1 kilowatt of power to run the electronics in the car. Let's do a little experiment. Let's drive across the parking lot here while you keep an eye on the information screen. I'm going to speed up to about 20 miles an hour, and you'll see some yellow bands here that show me that I'm using up energy. When I get a little ways across the parking lot, I'm going to hit the brakes, and you'll see that I'm putting green, which means I'm putting energy back into the vehicle. And then we'll look at that again in a different technique in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and speed up. We're not going to take off with a jackrabbit start, although one of the fun parts of driving an electric vehicle is that they do have a lot of pep. All right, here, let's go. You see the yellow bars, and now when I hit the brake, you see that I put that much of the green bars said I put that much energy back into the battery. Let's turn around and try this one more time. Let's move the camera over here to the screen in the middle of the console, and this is called the energy flow screen. And this also gives you the amount of battery that remains charged, and it'll show you the flow of electricity out of and into the battery. And now we'll repeat our trip and watch this screen. When we take off, we're sending energy to the motor, and when I hit the brakes, I'm putting it back into the battery. We recover about 85% of the energy that we're using to move the car at speed when we slow down. And that's one of the reasons why electric vehicles can go for approximately 125 miles per gallon equivalent. What does that mean? It means that for what you pay for a gallon of gasoline, I can drive 125 miles. We're taking a look underneath the hood of the Chevy Bolt electric vehicle to show you some of the components that only electric vehicles have, and the one that gasoline engines have also. Over here on the side, you see a normal 12-volt battery. This does the same function as it does in the gasoline car, running all of the electronics inside the vehicle. Different, though, are some of these devices here. One that you can't see, hiding underneath deep here, converts alternating current to direct current to charge your battery. We don't have an alternator or a generator in this car, so we must keep the 12-volt battery charged from the 355-volt battery, and this little device here is what does that, converting the 355 volts DC current to 14.5 to keep our battery charged. This device with all the wires is called a power distribution module, and in the back it's connected to the battery. once that energy gets up here, this is the device that decides where to send it. One of the places it sends it is to the module directly beneath, which converts the direct current back to alternating current to run your motor, which is directly beneath that device. And these large orange connections connect this distribution module to the power inverter, and then that is connected from the power inverter to the motor. Over here on the far side is an electric heater. Cars cannot take the heat off of the exhaust of the gasoline car, and so we must have an electric heater. Lastly, I want to point out that there are several coolant tanks which circulate to keep these devices, which get very hot when they're processing the electricity, in a cool and acceptable range. You'll note that they're all covered with orange on top of these cables, which are high voltage cables. And we go around and teach the firefighters that when they find an electric vehicle in an accident, they're to cut the black cable that disables this 12-volt battery, and that will close contacts, or actually open contacts, at the battery, so that none of that energy will energize any of these other cables which might be broken in the accident. The second question we're asked frequently is, why does an electric car cost 1/10 as much to drive as a gasoline car? First is the efficiency of an electric motor compared to a gasoline engine. Added to this is the regeneration and restoring of energy which you otherwise lose as heat when you step on the brakes of a gasoline car. Another reason is that there's almost no maintenance. A battery car has only 20 moving parts, which do not need any lubrication. There's no gas, no antifreeze, rare brake pad replacement, and so your maintenance costs are about as close to zero as one can get. A gasoline car does not enjoy any of these advantages, and you have to spend 10 times as much to run a gasoline car as an electric. I want to sincerely thank you for watching our presentation and tell you that our Electric Automobile Association serves as a great resource for any information that you might like to gain about an electric vehicle. We have online coffee get-togethers every month, and you're welcome to join our business meetings on the odd months.